The comfort of a normal life in medieval Europe hit a brutal paradox. While peasants quietly tended their fields, kings were trapped in a war that lasted entire generations over something as simple as who had the right to wear a crown. If this seems too distant to matter today, it is enough to think that decisions made centuries ago still shape borders, languages, and even the way countries see themselves. And if you like discovering these hidden stories behind the world we live in today, subscribe to the channel, because here we reveal exactly what no one told you about history, human behavior, and the origins of our present. The 100 Years' War began in an almost absurd way, not as a great immediate epic battle, but as a family dispute disguised as politics. On one side, the Kingdom of England, on the other, the Kingdom of France. The origin lay in blood ties between kings, confusing inheritances, and a question that seemed simple: who really had the right to the French throne? But in the medieval world, a question like that did not stay on paper, it turned into war. And here comes the first shock that changes everything. No one, at that beginning, imagined it would last more than a century. People lived and died without ever seeing the end of the conflict. It was as if the war had stopped being an event and become a permanent state of reality. But what is most curious is that, while kings planned strategies, most people just wanted to survive the next winter. And this creates a strange connection with the present. Often, major historical conflicts seem like elite decisions, but the ones who truly feel the impact are ordinary people. The war officially begins in the 14th century, with political and economic tensions, but quickly transforms into something much larger. What looked like a dispute among nobles becomes a testing ground for new military tactics, new weapons, and even new forms of social organization. The English longbow, for example, completely changes the balance of power in several battles, showing that simple technology can bring down ancient structures. And here comes an important moment of historical evidence that changes the way we understand this conflict. Military records and archaeological analyses of battlefields such as Crécy reveal something surprising. The French heavy cavalry, considered practically invincible, was defeated by ordinary soldiers armed with longbows and tactical discipline. It was not just brute force, it was coordination, range, and repetition. This dismantles the idea that power always belongs to the richest or the most protected. Sometimes it belongs to whoever understands the situation better. But the war was not only about weapons. It was about identity. Over time, English and French people began to see themselves not just as political rivals, but as different peoples with distinct cultures. And this is one of the deepest effects of the conflict. It helped shape what we now understand as nations. But in the middle of this chaos, a figure emerges that seems almost impossible to believe: Joan of Arc. A young peasant girl who claimed to hear voices and who somehow managed to convince an entire army that she could change the fate of France. In a world dominated by kings and experienced generals, she enters as a symbolic force, almost incomprehensible. What is most interesting is not just her story, but the psychological impact she had. In moments of extreme crisis, human societies tend to seek symbols of hope, figures that represent the idea that there is still a way out. Joan was not just an improbable military leader. She was an emotional point of unity in a fragmented country. And here another fascinating detail emerges. The longer the war lasts, the more it stops being about territory and becomes about emotional endurance. Imagine growing up in a world where your parents already lived in war, you grow up in war, and your children will likely grow up in war as well. This completely changes the way people understand time, the future, and even the value of life. As years pass, the human and economic costs become unsustainable. Cities are destroyed, harvests are interrupted, and the very idea of normality disappears in many regions. And still, the conflict continues, because stopping would mean admitting defeat for many leaders. But every long war has a breaking point, and here it begins to form slowly. Internal political changes, economic crises, and popular revolts start weakening both sides. What once seemed like an endless conflict begins to show signs of exhaustion. And then, something important happens. The war ends not with an absolute victory, but with a redefinition of what it meant to win. The outcome was not simply one side dominating the other, but the consolidation of stronger national identities. England and France emerged different from what they were at the beginning, almost as if the conflict itself had shaped their internal structures. If you look at it from the outside, it might seem like just another old war, but when you connect the dots, you realize something bigger. The Hundred Years' War was not just about kings fighting for power. It was about the transformation of medieval Europe into something closer to the modern world. It was about technology, identity, collective psychology, and survival. And perhaps the most unsettling thing of all is realizing how conflicts so ancient still echo today. The way countries are organized, how borders are defended, and even how national identities are built all carry traces of this period. In the end, what remains is not just the image of armies on muddy battlefields or castles at war, but the sense that human history is not made of isolated events. It is a continuous flow, where decisions made in moments of chaos quietly shape the future we call the present.